The expensive wine dripped down the pristine white tablecloth of Loup Blanc, my mother's favorite restaurant. Her hand still frozen midair where the glass had been moments ago. My father's face had turned an interesting shade of gray, while my sister Amanda smirked behind her menu, clearly enjoying the show. I sat there, calmly dabbing my napkin at a drop of wine that had landed on my Chanel blazer, the one they assumed was a knockoff when I wore it to dinner. Just 10 minutes ago they'd been tearing apart my life choices. Another year wasted, Mom had sighed dramatically, swirling her wine. All your college friends are married with proper careers now. What do you even do all day, Sarah? I'd given my usual vague response about consulting work, which only fueled their disappointment. Consulting? Dad scoffed. Is that what they call unemployment these days? Amanda had chimed in helpfully. At least she's not asking us for money like last time. That last time was 7 years ago when I'd asked for a loan to start my business. They'd laughed me out of the house. Starting a company? You can barely start your car, Dad had mocked. Now here we sat in this overpriced restaurant, my parents doing what they did best, listing my failures. No husband, no real job, not even a proper apartment, Mom continued, each word carefully chosen to sting. I just don't understand where we went wrong with you. That's when it happened. The moment that would change everything. Ms. Anderson. The voice cut through the restaurant like a knife. I'm so glad I caught you. I turned to see James Morrison, CEO of Morrison Technologies, striding toward our table. My father nearly choked on his bread. Morrison Technologies was his firm's biggest potential client, a contract he'd been chasing for months. My team is ready for our merger meeting tomorrow, James continued, completely oblivious to my family's shocked expressions. The paperwork is all set, just waiting for your final approval. My mother's wine glass slipped from her grasp, shattering against the hardwood floor. The rich red liquid spread like a guilty conscience. I'm sorry, my father interrupted, his voice unusually high. You must be mistaken. My daughter Sarah is the CEO of Anderson Global Solutions, James finished, looking confused. Surely you knew? We've been working on this merger for months. Your firm's acquisition will be the biggest deal of the quarter. The silence that followed was deafening. My father's firm wasn't acquiring Morrison Technologies. My company was acquiring my father's firm. I stood up slowly, straightening my knockoff blazer. James, always a pleasure. I'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. sharp. Then I turned to my stunned family. I should go. I have an early morning tomorrow. Lots of papers to sign. As I walked away, I heard Amanda's stage whisper. Did she just say she's buying Dad's company? Sometimes the best revenge isn't served cold. Sometimes it's served with a $500 bottle of spilled wine and a merger agreement that's about to turn your family's world upside down. I stepped out into the cool evening air, finally letting a small smile play across my lips. Tomorrow was going to be interesting. The next morning, I arrived at my office on the top floor of the Anderson Global Solutions building an hour early. The sun was just beginning to paint the city skyline in shades of gold and pink, a view I never tired of. 7 years ago, this had all been just a dream, sketched out in a worn notebook while I sat in my tiny studio apartment, living on ramen and determination. My executive assistant, Margaret, was already at her desk. She'd been with me since the beginning, one of the few people who believed in my vision when everyone else laughed. Your father called 17 times since 6 a.m., she said, handing me my usual morning coffee. Your mother sent 32 text messages and your sister tried to add you on LinkedIn. She paused, a slight smirk playing on her lips. Should I continue ignoring them? I took a sip of my coffee, savoring the familiar bitter warmth. What time did Dad's last call come in? 10 minutes ago. He sounded desperate. Of course he did. By now he would have done his research, discovered exactly who I was, what I'd built. Anderson Global Solutions had grown from a small tech consulting firm into a corporate giant, specializing in digital transformation and company restructuring. We had offices in 12 countries, over 5,000 employees, and a market value that made venture capitalists salivate. And today we were about to acquire Morton and Anderson Associates, my father's pride and joy, the company he'd spent 30 years building. Ms. Anderson? Margaret's voice interrupted my thoughts. The board members are gathering in the main conference room. Mr. Morrison's team just arrived. I nodded, straightening my navy silk blouse. And my father? In the lobby, arguing with security. He doesn't have an appointment. I checked my reflection in the window, making sure my mask of professional indifference was firmly in place. Let him up. But make him wait. The next hour was a blur of handshakes, coffee, and preliminary discussions. James Morrison sat to my right, his team of lawyers spread out around him. My board members filled the other seats, all except one directly across from me, intentionally empty. At precisely 8:59 a.m., Margaret's voice came through the intercom. "Mr. Anderson is here. Send him in." The door opened and my father stepped into the room. Gone was the arrogant man who'd dismissed me at dinner. This version of Robert Anderson looked smaller somehow, his usual confidence replaced by barely concealed panic. "Sarah," he started, then seemed to notice the room full of executives. "I mean Ms. Anderson dash. Please take a seat, Mr. Anderson." I gestured to the empty chair. We were just about to begin. He sat down heavily, his eyes darting between me and James Morrison, probably still trying to process how his daughter had ended up on the other side of this table. I opened the leather portfolio in front of me, pulling out the acquisition agreement. "As you're all aware, we're here to finalize the merger between Anderson Global Solutions and Morton and Anderson Associates. The terms are straightforward. Full acquisition with current management to be retained for a transitional period of 6 months. My father's face paled. 6 months. I was giving him 6 months before he'd have to step down from his own company. "This is ridiculous," he burst out suddenly. "You can't, I mean this is a family business dash." "Mr. Anderson," I cut him off smoothly, "this is a business meeting. Family matters aren't relevant here." The irony of throwing his own words back at him wasn't lost on anyone in the room. How many times had he told me to separate family and business? James Morrison cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should review the terms?" For the next 2 hours we went through the agreement line by line. My father sat there, watching helplessly as his company was carved up and reorganized. Every now and then his phone would buzz, probably my mother, demanding updates. Finally we reached the last page. The signature page. "If everyone's satisfied with the terms," I said, sliding the contract across the table, "we can proceed with signing." My father stared at the document like it might bite him. "Sarah, please," he whispered, low enough that only I could hear. "We need to talk about this." I met his eyes, keeping my voice equally quiet. "Like we talked about my business plan 7 years ago? Or like we talked about my failures at dinner last night?" He flinched. "The difference is," I continued, "I'm not laughing you out of the room. I'm offering you a fair deal, which is more than you ever offered me." My father picked up the pen, his hand trembling slightly. As he signed his name, I could see the moment it truly hit him, how completely the tables had turned. After everyone had signed, there was the usual round of congratulations and handshakes. James Morrison was particularly pleased. This merger would benefit both our companies significantly. As the room began to clear out, my father remained seated, staring at his copy of the contract. "Sarah," he said finally, "how long have you been planning this?" I gathered my papers, taking my time to answer. "I wasn't planning anything, Dad. I built my company from nothing with no help from anyone. The fact that I'm now in a position to acquire your firm is just, what did Mom call it last night? Ah yes, life's little ironies." He winced at the reminder of last night's dinner. "Your mother, she's going to dash. Have a complete meltdown?" I finished for him. "Probably. But look on the bright side, at least now she can't say I never amounted to anything." As I walked toward the door I paused. "Oh, and Dad, don't forget board meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. Don't be late. Unlike you, I actually believe in running a professional business." The look on his face as I left the room was worth every sleepless night, every missed social event, every moment of doubt I'd endured while building my company. But this wasn't over yet. If I knew my family, and I did, the real drama was just beginning. The next 48 hours were exactly the chaos I'd expected. My mother had gone from leaving hysterical voicemails to showing up at my office building twice, only to be politely turned away by security. Amanda, ever the opportunist, had sent me 3 different resumes, apparently being my sister suddenly qualified her for an executive position. But it was the Sunday family dinner that would truly test everyone's limits. My parents had insisted, no, begged that I attend. To discuss things as a family, Mom had said in her last message. I pulled up to their suburban house in my Aston Martin, the same driveway where Dad had once told me I'd never afford more than a used Honda. The front door opened before I could even ring the bell. Sarah, darling. My mother's voice was syrupy sweet, a tone I recognized from when she wanted something. She was wearing her best dress, hair perfectly coiffed as if this were a business negotiation. In her mind it probably was. The living room looked like a stage set for reconciliation. Fresh flowers, good china laid out, even Dad's prized whiskey collection on display. Amanda sat perched on the edge of the sofa, trying her best to look professional in what I recognized as a newly purchased suit. Sit, sit. Mom gestured to the armchair, deliberately placing me where everyone could face me. Classic power play move, one I'd learned to recognize in countless boardrooms. Would you like some tea? Or perhaps something stronger? Dad offered, hovering near his whiskey collection. Water is fine, I replied, smoothing my skirt as I sat down. Let's not pretend this is a social call. Mom's carefully constructed smile flickered. Sarah, honey, we've been doing a lot of thinking and research, Amanda chimed in eagerly. Did you know you're listed in Forbes 40 under 40? Yes, Amanda, I was there for the photo shoot. I turned back to Mom. You were saying? Well, Mom continued, exchanging glances with Dad, we realize we may have underestimated your potential. We didn't see your vision. Because you never bothered to look, I interrupted. 7 years ago I came to you with a solid business plan. I had market research, financial projections, everything. But you and Dad were too busy laughing to even read it. Dad stepped forward, whiskey in hand despite my decline. Princess, we were trying to protect you. The business world is harsh. Don't. My voice cut through the room like ice. Don't call me princess, and don't pretend this was about protection. You told everyone who would listen that I was a disappointment. You made jokes about my little computer business at every family gathering. You took my college fund money from my grandparents and gave it to Amanda for her third attempt at graduate school. Amanda had the grace to look embarrassed. But that's not even the worst part, I continued, feeling 7 years of suppressed anger rising to the surface. The worst part was how you made me feel small. Every dinner, every holiday, every family event became an opportunity to remind me of my failures. Did you ever once ask what I was building? Did you ever show even a moment of interest in my work? But honey, Mom interjected, how were we supposed to know? You were so secretive. Secretive. I laughed. I stopped sharing because you stopped listening. Do you know who my first investor was? Grandpa's old business partner, the one you always dismissed as a crazy old man. He listened to my pitch and invested $500,000 the next day. That investment is worth over $50 million now. The room fell silent. Dad's whiskey glass froze halfway to his lips. And now, I continued, now that I've succeeded despite you, not because of you, you want to play happy family? Let me guess. You've realized that having a CEO daughter could be socially advantageous. Mom's face confirmed my suspicion. The country club is having their annual business gala next month, she said carefully. We thought as a family. No. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. Here's what's going to happen. Dad will continue running his division of my company for the next 6 months. He'll do it professionally and efficiently, or he'll be replaced sooner. Amanda, stop sending resumes to my HR department. An MBA you never finished doesn't qualify you for an executive position. But we're family. Mom protested. Exactly. And family should have supported me when I needed it. Family should have believed in me. Family shouldn't have spent years tearing me down to build themselves up. I walked to the door, then turned back one last time. Oh, and Mom? About the country club gala. I bought the country club last month. Consider your membership under review. The drive home was quiet, the city lights blurring past my windows. Margaret had texted. There was a potential new acquisition in Singapore that needed my attention. Life moved on, business continued. 2 weeks later, I received a letter from my father. Inside was a worn notebook. My original business plan, the one they'd refused to read 7 years ago. A sticky note was attached. I read it. You were right. I was wrong. I'm sorry. It wasn't everything, but it was a start. The following board meeting, my father arrived early, prepared and professional. He didn't try to make excuses or play the family card. Instead, he presented solid ideas for transitioning his client base to our digital platforms. After the meeting, he stopped by my office. "I never saw you," he said quietly. "I was so busy looking at who I wanted you to be, I never saw who you actually were." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "I'm proud of you," he added. "Not because of what you built, but because you built it even when I said you couldn't." As he left, I looked out at the city skyline, my skyline now. Success wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. And sometimes, just sometimes, those who dismissed you along the way might finally open their eyes and see you for who you really are. A month later, at the company's annual charity gala, I stood at the podium announcing our new initiative, the AGS Young Entrepreneurs Program. A fund specifically designed to support young businesspeople who, like me years ago, had vision but lacked support. In the audience, I spotted my parents. Mom wasn't wearing her usual look of disappointment, and Dad actually seemed engaged. Amanda sat beside them, clutching a brochure about our entry-level management training program. At least she was finally willing to start from the bottom. "Success isn't a straight line," I told the crowd. "Sometimes the people closest to us can't see our potential. But that doesn't mean we don't have it. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest motivation of all." After the speech, Dad approached me with a familiar leather notebook in his hands, my old business plan. "I thought," he said hesitantly, "maybe we could display this in the company museum. Show others where Aegis began." I smiled, taking the notebook. Perhaps bridges weren't burned after all, just rebuilt differently.
The church was packed for my father's funeral. Jonathan Barrett had been a pillar of the community, building Barrett Construction from a small residential contractor to the largest commercial developer in 3 states. Everyone who mattered was there. Business associates, politicians, family friends, all paying their respects to a man who had built an empire worth over $75 million from nothing. I stood quietly near the casket, accepting condolences with my sister Kate. We both dropped everything to come home when Dad had his heart attack. Though we'd arrived too late to say goodbye. Kate had flown in from her surgical residency in Boston, while I'd left my architectural firm in Chicago. We'd always been close, united by our shared grief after Mom died when we were teenagers, and now by the loss of our father. "How are you holding up, Rachel?" Kate whispered as another group of mourners moved past. "I'm managing," I replied, though the truth was I felt numb. Dad and I had always been close. As the daughter who followed him into the construction industry, albeit as an architect rather than a developer, we shared a special bond. Kate squeezed my hand as our cousin Michael approached, his wife Vanessa at his side. Michael was Uncle Robert's son, and he'd been working at Barrett Construction since college. While Kate and I had pursued our own paths, Michael had positioned himself as Dad's right hand and apparent successor. Rachel, Kate, Michael embraced us with practiced sympathy. "Your father was like a second father to me. This is devastating for all of us." There was something performative about his grief that set my teeth on edge, but I pushed the feeling aside. This wasn't the time. "Thank you for handling the arrangements," I said. Dad had suffered his heart attack at the office, and Michael had taken charge of everything while Kate and I were traveling home. Of course, Michael nodded solemnly. Jonathan would have expected nothing less. In fact, he'd been preparing me to take over more responsibilities. We'd been discussing my eventually taking the CEO position. I blinked in surprise. This was the first I'd heard of any succession plan favoring Michael. Dad had always been tight-lipped about his business decisions, but this seemed like something he would have mentioned. "I'm sure we'll all have time to discuss the company after we've had a chance to grieve," Kate interjected smoothly, ever the diplomat. Michael's expression hardened slightly. "Actually, there are some matters that can't wait. I've scheduled a family meeting at the house after the reception. The lawyers will be there." After the burial, mourners gathered at my father's sprawling Victorian home on Lakeview Drive. The house where Kate and I had grown up was now filled with visitors eating catered food and sharing stories about Dad. I moved through the rooms in a daze, accepting condolences and trying to process that he was really gone. "Rachel," a familiar voice pulled me from my thoughts. I turned to see Martin Chen, Dad's longtime friend and the architect who had first inspired my career choice. "Martin, thank you for coming." We embraced, and I felt tears threatening again. Martin had been a fixture in our lives, almost family. "Jonathan was so proud of you," he said, his voice gentle. He told everyone about your Chicago firm and the awards you've won. I smiled through my tears. We were working on a project together, actually, a community center downtown. Dad was providing the land and financing, and I was designing it. Martin looked surprised. I hadn't heard about that. We were keeping it quiet until the plans were finalized. Dad wanted it to be his legacy project: affordable housing, community spaces, a medical clinic. We were going to break ground next spring. Before Martin could respond, Michael appeared, announcing that the family meeting would begin in Dad's study. I excused myself and made my way through the house, finding Kate already seated in one of the leather chairs facing Dad's massive oak desk. Michael had positioned himself in Dad's chair, with his wife standing beside him. Two men in suits, lawyers presumably, stood nearby. "Now that we're all here," Michael began once I'd taken a seat, "we can address some urgent matters. As you know, Jonathan was the sole owner of Barrett Construction and all its subsidiaries. With his unexpected passing, there are decisions that need to be made immediately to ensure business continuity." One of the lawyers stepped forward. "I'm James Wilson, the corporate counsel for Barrett Construction. In the absence of a formally executed will—" "Wait," I interrupted. "What do you mean, absence of a will?" "Dad definitely had a will. He updated it every few years." Michael cleared his throat. "Unfortunately, there was an accident last week. Jonathan had his estate documents out for review, and there was a fire in the fireplace. A draft caught some papers. The will was destroyed." I stared at him in disbelief, and there were no copies, with the lawyers or anywhere else. "Your father preferred to keep his personal affairs private," Wilson explained. "He kept the original in his home safe. We were scheduled to review it this coming week, but—" Kate leaned forward. "This doesn't make sense. Dad was meticulous about everything, especially legal matters." "Grief can be disorienting," Michael said with practiced sympathy. "The important thing now is to establish interim leadership for the company. As the senior executive and Jonathan's closest male relative, I'm prepared to step in as acting CEO until more permanent arrangements can be made." The second lawyer distributed folders. "We've prepared these interim management agreements. Essentially, they authorize Michael to manage all Barrett family assets and business interests while the estate is settled. Without a will, this process could take some time." I opened the folder and skimmed the document, my suspicion growing with every paragraph. The agreement would effectively give Michael complete control over Dad's entire estate. The company, properties, investments, everything. "And if we don't sign?" Kate asked, always direct. Michael's smile tightened. "Without clear authority, the company could face operational paralysis. Projects would stall, contracts could be jeopardized, and the value of the estate, your inheritance, could be significantly diminished." I closed the folder. "We need time to review this with our own lawyers." Of course, Michael nodded magnanimously. "But I should mention that there are several major deals in progress that require immediate attention. Any delay could be costly." "We'll have our answer tomorrow," I said firmly. "For now, I think we've had enough business talk for a funeral day." As the meeting broke up, I caught Wilson giving Michael a subtle nod. Something wasn't right, and I needed to find out what before signing anything. That evening, after most of the mourners had left, Kate and I sat in the kitchen of our childhood home, trying to make sense of the day's events. "There's no way Dad's will just happen to burn up right before he died," Kate said, expressing exactly what I'd been thinking. "And there's no way he didn't have copies," I added. "Michael is lying." Kate rubbed her temples. "But why?" "Dad treated Michael like a son. He was already going to inherit something substantial." I thought about Michael's ambition, how he'd always wanted to be seen as Dad's successor. Maybe substantial wasn't enough. Maybe he wanted everything. What do? We can't prove anything, and without the will? I stood up, suddenly remembering something important. Dad took me to his bank last month. He showed me his safe deposit box and made sure I knew how to access it. He said it was just in case. Kate's eyes widened. "Do you think?" "I don't know, but it's worth checking. The bank opens at 9 o'clock tomorrow." The next morning, we arrived at First National Bank as soon as it opened. The manager, recognizing us as Jonathan Barrett's daughters, expressed his condolences before escorting us to the vault area. "Your father was one of our most valued clients," he explained as he located the correct box. He maintained several accounts and this safe deposit box for over 30 years. He used his key, and I used the key Dad had given me. The box slid out, and my heart raced as the manager discreetly left us alone with its contents. Inside were several sealed envelopes, a USB drive, and a leather portfolio. The largest envelope was labeled Last While and Testament. Copias held by Greenwood Law Offices. I knew it, Kate whispered as I opened the envelope. The will was comprehensive and crystal clear. Dad had left 30% of Barrett Construction to me, 30% to Kate, 20% to Michael, and 10% to a charitable foundation he'd established in my mother's name. He'd named me as CEO, citing my architectural vision and business acumen, with provisions for Kate to remain on the board despite her medical career. But that wasn't all. The leather portfolio contained detailed plans for the community center project I'd mentioned to Martin, complete with funding allocations, land deeds, and architectural renderings I created. Dad had already transferred the downtown property and $25 million in development funds to a separate LLC that was jointly owned by him and me. The USB drive contained years of company records, including evidence that Michael had been systematically diverting company resources to side projects that benefited him personally, not enough to be immediately noticeable, but substantial over time. He didn't just want to control the company, I realized aloud. He needed to cover up what he'd been doing. Kate squeezed my hand. What's our next move? I thought of Michael sitting in Dad's chair, so confident in his scheme. We go to the meeting he's arranged and bring some guests of our own. That afternoon, Michael greeted us with barely concealed impatience as we entered Dad's study. He had the signed management agreements laid out on the desk, pens at the ready. Have you made your decision? He asked. As I mentioned, we have pressing matters requiring immediate attention. We have, I replied calmly. But before we sign anything, we'd like to introduce some people. On cue, the study door opened. Martin Chen entered, followed by an elegant older woman I knew was Dad's personal attorney, Sophia Greenwood. Behind them came two members of the Barrett Construction Board of Directors. Michael's expression flickered between confusion and alarm. What is this? This, I said, placing Dad's will on the desk, is a copy of our father's actual will. The one you knew existed because he'd reviewed it with all his senior executives last year. Color drained from Michael's face. Where did you? Dad kept copies in his safe deposit box, Kate explained, along with some very interesting company records. Sophia Greenwood stepped forward. As Jonathan Barrett's personal attorney, I can confirm this is his most recent will, properly executed and witnessed. I hold the official copy in my firm's records. Michael's corporate lawyer Wilson looked stunned. I was told there was no will, that everything had been destroyed in an accident. There was no accident, I said, my voice steady despite my anger. Michael lied to you, to us, and planned to seize control of everything our father built. These are serious accusations, Michael blustered, but his confidence was visibly crumbling. I was only trying to ensure business continuity during a difficult time. By presenting false documents and attempting to defraud the rightful heirs. Sophia asked sharply. That's not continuity, that's criminal. One of the board members, Janet Forrest, spoke up. The board will need to address this immediately. Michael's actions represent a serious breach of fiduciary duty. Michael looked desperately around the room, finding no allies. This is a misunderstanding. I was only acting in the family's best interests. And the funds you diverted to Pinnacle Ventures? I asked, referencing information from the USB drive. Was that in the family's best interest too? His face went completely white. How did you? Dad knew, Kate said quietly. He was gathering evidence. That's probably why he made sure we could access the safe deposit box. For the next hour, the true extent of Michael's betrayal unfolded. He'd not only planned to hijack the entire company but had been embezzling funds for years. Dad had suspected but had been gathering concrete proof before confronting him. As the meeting concluded, Michael and his wife were escorted from the property by security. The board members called an emergency session, and Sophia began the formal process of executing Dad's will. Left alone in the study with Kate, I finally let my guard down. I can't believe he would do this. Dad trusted him. Kate put her arm around me. Dad also protected against it. He made sure we had what we needed to expose the truth. I nodded, glancing around the study that held so many memories. My eyes fell on the architectural plans for the community center, Dad's legacy project, now my responsibility to complete. "What will you do about the CEO position?" Kate asked. "Dad named you in the will, but you have your own firm in Chicago." I traced my fingers over the community center designs. "I think it's time to come home. Dad built something important here. He trusted me to carry it forward." 1 month later, I stood on the vacant downtown lot where the Barrett Community Center would soon rise. Construction equipment was already in place for the groundbreaking ceremony scheduled for the following day. The project had expanded to include not just affordable housing and a medical clinic, but also an educational center for construction and architectural training for underprivileged youth. Michael had been removed from the company and was facing criminal charges for embezzlement. He and Vanessa had left town, their carefully crafted social standing in ruins. Kate had returned to Boston but planned to split her time between her medical career and her board responsibilities. We discovered that Dad had been quietly funding a medical research initiative in Mom's name at Kate's hospital, another piece of his legacy neither of us had known about. As the sun began to set over the city skyline, I felt a sense of peace washing over me. Dad had prepared us better than we'd ever known, not just with assets and legal protections, but with the values and skills to continue what he'd started. "We're ready for tomorrow's ceremony, Ms. Barrett," my project manager called from across the lot. "Thank you, David," I replied, taking one last look at the empty space that would soon transform into Dad's final gift to the community. "I think we're ready for everything now." In my pocket was the key to Dad's safe deposit box, a reminder that sometimes the most important inheritances aren't just what's visible to others, but the foresight, wisdom, and love that remain long after someone is gone. Michael had been so focused on controlling the company that he completely missed the true wealth Dad had built, not just in assets, but in relationships, respect, and vision for the future. While my cousin had schemed for what he could take, Dad had been quietly planning what he could give. Standing there on the threshold of that future, I silently thanked my father for his final lesson. True legacy isn't measured in dollars or property deeds, but in the positive change we create and the wisdom we pass on. Michael had tried to steal an inheritance, but he could never touch the real wealth Dad had left us, the opportunity to continue making a difference in the world he loved. The dust motes danced in the afternoon sunlight streaming through the Victorian windows of Madeline's Antiques and Curiosities, my grandmother's shop, now my shop, though my family couldn't understand why I'd want it. "My name is Emma Bradford, and this is how my grandmother's worthless inheritance changed everything. You can't be serious about keeping this place," my sister Rachel said, wrinkling her nose at the cluttered shelves. "It's literally full of other people's junk." I ran my hand along the mahogany sideboard, remembering how Grandma Madeline had taught me to spot genuine Chippendale from reproductions. "It's not junk. Every piece has a story." "Sure," Rachel laughed. "Stories that won't pay the property taxes. God, Emma, you have an MBA from Harvard. You could be running Dad's investment firm, not playing shopkeeper with Grandma's trash heap." The trash heap had been Grandma's pride and joy for 40 years. While the rest of the family focused on building their banking empire, she'd built something different, a haven for historical treasures and the stories they carried. "The will readings tomorrow," Rachel reminded me. "Last chance to change your mind. Take your share of the liquid assets instead of this," she gestured dismissively at the shop. But I'd already made my decision. When Grandma's will had given us choices about our inheritance, my siblings had immediately opted for cash and stocks. Only I had chosen the shop, much to everyone's derision. After Rachel left, I locked up and headed to the small apartment above the store, also part of my inheritance. The space was tiny compared to my former luxury condo, but it felt more like home than anywhere I'd lived since leaving for college. Grandma's last letter lay on the kitchen table, delivered by her lawyer the day she died. "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, you've chosen the shop over the money. I knew you would. You're the only one who ever understood that value isn't just about dollars and cents. There are secrets in this old place, treasures hidden in plain sight, but finding them requires patience, knowledge, and most importantly, the wisdom to look beyond the obvious. I've left you everything you need to understand. Just remember what I taught you about Victorian mirrors and the stories they reflect. All my love, Grandma Madeline." The letter had puzzled me for days. Grandma had taught me countless things about antiques, but what was special about Victorian mirrors? The next morning, I arrived early at the family lawyer's office for the formal will reading. My parents, 3 siblings, and various aunts and uncles were already there, dressed in expensive suits that screamed old money. "Emma," Mom said tightly, "Mr. Peterson says you're still insisting on taking the shop." "That's right." "But darling," Dad interjected, "be reasonable. Your share of the liquid assets would be over $5 million. The shop barely breaks even." "I've made my decision." "Yes," my brother James sneered, "we know. Throwing away your future to play with Grandma's dusty antiques. At least you're making everyone else's share bigger." Mr. Peterson cleared his throat. "Shall we begin?" The will reading was exactly what we expected. Grandma's considerable fortune, built from her family's railroad money, was divided among those who chose cash. The shop and its contents went to me, along with a modest account to cover operating expenses. "Well," Aunt Patricia said afterward, "I suppose someone had to take the white elephant. Though really, Emma, with your education." I let their comments wash over me, thinking about Grandma's letter. Something about Victorian mirrors. Back at the shop, I began a systematic examination of every mirror in the inventory. There were dozens, from ornate gilt monstrosities to simple wooden-framed looking glasses. All genuinely Victorian. Grandma never delved in reproductions. As I worked, I remembered her lessons. Victorian mirrors tell stories, Emma, not just in what they reflect, but in how they're made. The backing, the frame construction, the mounting methods, every detail matters. It was the mounting that caught my attention on the largest mirror, a magnificent piece that dominated the shop's back wall. Unlike the others, it was attached with modern brackets, though they'd been artificially aged to match the period. The mirror had been there as long as I could remember, but something about it had always bothered Grandma. "Not quite right," she'd mutter sometimes, studying it with a frown. Now I understood why. The mounting was wrong for the period. With trembling hands, I carefully detached the mirror from the wall. Behind it was a safe, its door flush with the plaster. My phone buzzed. A text from Rachel. "Last chance to be sensible. Dad's offering to buy you out. Don't be stupid." I ignored it, focusing on the safe. The combination lock was old. Probably installed when the building was built in the 1890s. But what would Grandma have used as the combination? Then I remembered another lesson. In the Victorian era, Emma, people often use significant dates as codes. The trick is knowing which date matters. I tried several dates. Grandma's birthday, the shop's founding, the building's construction. Nothing worked. Finally, I tried one more. 18,640,723. July 23, 1864, the date her great-grandfather had made the family's first railroad fortune. The lock clicked open. Inside was a single leather-bound ledger and another envelope with my name on it. "My clever girl," Grandma's letter began. "I knew you'd figure it out. Now it's time for you to learn the truth about our family's real legacy and about the greatest treasure hunt in American history." The ledger was unlike anything I'd seen before. Page after page of coded entries, detailed maps, and what looked like inventory lists. But it wasn't merchandise for the shop. These were descriptions of historical artifacts, priceless pieces that had supposedly been lost to time. And there on the final page was a newspaper clipping from 1875. "Railroad Baron's collection vanishes. Priceless historical artifacts missing, presumed lost at sea." Except they hadn't been lost at all. My hands shook as I read Grandma's letter. The public story was a lie. Your great-great-grandfather didn't lose those artifacts. He hid them, protecting them from a corrupt government that would have destroyed their true historical significance. For 5 generations, our family has been the secret guardians of America's lost treasures. The shop isn't just a business, it's a cover, a way to track and protect pieces of history until they can safely return to the light. The ledger contains everything: locations, provenances, the true stories behind each piece. But be careful. There are people who have been searching for these artifacts for over a century, people who wouldn't hesitate to kill for them. Trust no one until you understand everything. And remember, sometimes the greatest treasures are hidden in plain sight. Begin with the Jefferson pieces. You'll find the first clue in the Chippendale desk's secret drawer, the one I taught you to open when you were 12. I sat back, my mind racing. The antique shop wasn't just a shop. It was the front for what might be the greatest historical discovery of the century, and my wealthy, judgmental family had no idea. My hands trembled as I approached the Chippendale desk that had stood in Grandma's office for decades. The secret drawer mechanism was exactly as I remembered. Push the third rosette on the right panel while pulling the bottom drawer. The hidden compartment slid open silently, revealing a leather portfolio and what looked like an ancient key. Breaking and entering now. I whirled around. My brother James stood in the doorway, looking smugly superior in his $1,000 suit. "It's my shop," I reminded him. "I can examine my own furniture. For now." He strolled in, running a manicure finger along the desk's surface. "But let's be realistic, Emma. You can't maintain this place on the operating budget Grandma left. Dad's offering you a way out." I discreetly slipped the portfolio and key into my jacket pocket. "Not interested." $2 million over your inheritance share, he pressed. "That's generous for a failing business." "The shop isn't failing." "No." He picked up a ledger from the desk, thankfully not the secret one from the safe. "Then why are the sales numbers down 30% from last year?" "Face it, sis, Grandma's reputation kept this place afloat. Without her." I said no, James. After he left, I locked the shop and retreated to the apartment. The portfolio contained a series of letters between my great-great-grandfather and Thomas Jefferson's great-grandson. They detailed an arrangement to protect priceless artifacts from the Jefferson estate, pieces that had never been recorded in official inventories. The key, according to a coded note, opened a storage unit in Philadelphia, one that had been continuously rented by our family since 1875. My phone buzzed. "Rachel, James says you're being stubborn. Just take Dad's offer before you bankrupt yourself." I ignored it, focusing on the letters. The Jefferson pieces were just the beginning. The collection included items from the Founding Fathers, Native American artifacts that predated Columbus, and documents that could rewrite American history. But Grandma was right about the danger. Several letters mentioned interested parties who would stop at nothing to claim the artifacts. The most recent letter, dated just months before Grandma's death, warned of renewed interest from powerful collectors. A knock at the apartment door interrupted my reading. Through the peephole, I saw a distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit. "Ms. Bradford? I'm Harrison Wells from the Smithsonian Institution. We need to talk about your grandmother's collection." My pulse quickened. How had they found out so quickly? "I have all the proper paperwork," he continued, holding up an ID badge. "This is a matter of national historical significance." Something felt off. I checked my phone, quickly Googling Harrison Wells Smithsonian. No results. Another knock, more insistent this time. "Ms. Bradford, please. Time is of the essence." I backed away from the door, grabbing my laptop and a ledger. Grandma's letter had warned me to trust no one, and this man's story wasn't checking out. The kitchen window opened onto the fire escape. I was halfway down when I heard the apartment door crash open. "Find her," a harsh voice ordered. "And find that ledger." I ran through back alleys, my heart pounding. 3 blocks away, I ducked into the public library and called the only person I could trust. Dr. Sarah Chen, my best friend and a curator at the actual Smithsonian. "Emma," she answered on the first ring. "I was just about to call you. Someone's been asking questions about your grandmother's shop." "Fake Smithsonian agent. How did you? Wait, are you in trouble?" "Maybe. How fast can you get to Boston?" "I'm already here. Your grandmother contacted me months ago. Asked me to help you when the time came. Meet me at the Museum of Fine Arts in an hour." The museum's cafe was quiet. Sarah listened intently as I explained everything. The safe, the ledger, the Jefferson letters. "My God," she breathed. "If this is real, Emma, do you understand what you found? This could be the most significant historical discovery in decades." "But who are these people after the ledger?" "There's a black market for historical artifacts. Extremely wealthy collectors who want pieces of American history for themselves, no matter the cost." "Your grandmother. What about her?" Sarah hesitated. "She contacted me because she'd been receiving threats. Someone had discovered part of the truth about the collection. She needed help authenticating and protecting the artifacts when they were finally revealed." "Why didn't she tell me?" "To protect you. She wanted to make sure you chose the shop for the right reasons, not out of obligation. My phone buzzed again. Dad, this time. Emma, this is ridiculous. The shop was robbed? File an insurance claim and take our offer. The robbery was already being used to pressure me into selling. But they had no idea what they were really pressuring me to give up. Sarah, I need your help. That storage unit in Philadelphia, she grinned. Already got a team ready. Official Smithsonian expedition. We can be there tomorrow. The next 24 hours changed everything. The storage unit contained exactly what the letters had promised. An astonishing collection of historical artifacts, perfectly preserved. Thomas Jefferson's personal scientific instruments, Benjamin Franklin's unpublished manuscripts, Native American relics that predated known settlements. This is unprecedented, Sarah's authentication team declared. The historical significance, it's beyond calculation. News of the discovery exploded across media outlets. Lost American treasure is found in antique shop in TNC. Historical discovery Iraqis academici world. Priceless artifacts preserved by secret family legacy. My family's reaction was predictable. You knew about this, James accused during an emergency family meeting. That's why you wouldn't sell. No, I corrected him. I chose the shop because I loved it, just like Grandma did. The treasures were a bonus. The attempted robbery was revealed as the work of private collectors who had been searching for the artifacts for generations. The FBI arrested Harrison Wells and his team. They'd been behind similar heists at other historical sites. 1 year later, I stood in the Smithsonian's new Bradford Jefferson Collection wing, watching visitors marvel at the exhibits. The antique shop was thriving, transformed into a combination museum and high-end dealership for authenticated historical pieces. Not bad for a failing business, Sarah teased, joining me at the opening gala. My family had finally stopped trying to rescue me from my inheritance. The shop's reputation for authenticating historical artifacts made it more profitable than ever. But more importantly, it continued Grandma's real mission, protecting and preserving pieces of history. Rachel approached, looking sheepish. So, that Chippendale desk, does it really have a secret drawer? I smiled. Want me to show you how to open it? The Bradford family collection became one of the most significant historical discoveries of the century. But for me, the real treasure was understanding what Grandma had tried to teach us all along. That true value isn't always obvious at first glance. Last week, a young girl visited the shop with her mother. As they examined a Victorian mirror, I heard her ask, "How do you know if something's really valuable?" I thought of Grandma as I answered, "The real value of anything isn't in what others think it's worth. It's in the story it tells and the truth it preserves." The ledger stays locked in the shop's new state-of-the-art safe, but I don't need it anymore. Its most important lesson wasn't about hidden treasures. It was about seeing the value in what others dismiss. Every morning, as I open the shop, I thank Grandma for trusting me with her real legacy. Not just the priceless artifacts, but the understanding that sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones others are too blind to see. And those Victorian mirrors, they're still telling stories if you know how to look.